Hello students, let us continue with the chapter Management of Natural Resources. Today's topic is conservation of water. Water is essential for all terrestrial forms of life. We have already studied about the water cycle in the chapter Natural Resources in Standard 9. Now in India, for irrigation purposes, we mostly depend on rains, and we get these rains due to the monsoon winds. Though the monsoon may be bountiful, yet there is a lack of groundwater. Now what is the reason for this lack in groundwater level? There are a few reasons such as loss of vegetation cover, diversion of water to crops that are highly demanding water, and also due to pollution from industrial effluents and urban waste. Now let us think on the topic how these water resources were managed before the British arrived in India, during the time of British, and after the British left. First, before the arrival of the British, in India we had several indigenous methods of conserving water and its management. There were dams, ponds, lakes, canals, etc. The water that was stored in these storage systems were very judiciously used for irrigation purposes and for daily needs. The water that was stored was strictly regulated, and optimum cropping patterns were followed, which was based on decades of experience or centuries of experiences. These local systems were managed by the local people, and this was a local affair. It was very well managed by the local people because they understood the needs of that particular locale. And the knowledge they had was not attained one fine morning. They had the complete knowledge of the climate, the water resource, etc. And this knowledge came from experiences of centuries and decades. Therefore, a very well equipped and maintained system was followed in ancient India, and there was equitable distribution of water. Now once the British arrived, all these local practices and the local knowledge was ignored, and new concepts were introduced, such as building of huge dams, canals that traversed across the length and breadth of the country. The local practices of conserving water was completely ignored. So these systems, they were not functioning properly. Now once the British left, the idea that was conceived by the British was taken forward by our politicians in the 5-year plans, thus gave birth to multi-purpose projects and huge dams and canals were built. But the result was that the local systems were completely ignored, and all these systems now were not in the hands of the local people, but it was under the irrigation department of the government. These local systems became defunct and there was no amicable distribution of water. Thus, these became completely dysfunctional and the needs of the local people were ignored. Now let us look into the system of Khulls. Khulls is a system of irrigation found in Himachal Pradesh. It is almost 400-year-old system. Man-made channels are cut from streams and rivers, and this bring in water to the houses and also to the fields. It was an arrangement between 2 or 3 villages, and the water was equally distributed among these villages. There was a common agreement between the villages. The interesting part is that during the planting season, the village that was furthest away from the source received water first, and then progressively higher up the villages received water. This system worked very well because the villagers appointed 2 or 3 people to manage the flow of water through these man-made channels. And there was an amicable distribution of water among the people in the villages. But once it was taken up by the government, all this became dysfunctional or defunct, and there was no amicable distribution of water among the villages. Thus, we can see that the local needs and the knowledge of the local people were completely ignored. Now, we need to study about the waterman of India. Rajendra Prasad is known as the waterman of India because he did a lot of work in the field of conservation and preservation of water, especially in the state of Rajasthan. He also received Raman Magsaysay Award for his work for the conservation of water resources. Therefore, he is rightly called as the waterman of India. With that, we conclude today's session. Thank you.